motor sputtered to life as Giuseppe Morty untied his weathered fishing boat from the dock. Dawn hadn't yet broken over the Venetian lagoon, and a thick mist clung to the water like a burial shroud. He'd been a fisherman for 40 years, following routes his father and grandfather had mapped before him. But today, the usual paths were barren. The fish had vanished, as if sensing something the old man couldn't. His nets had been empty for 3 days straight. Bills were piling up, and his wife Maria's worried glances cut deeper than any fishing knife. Desperation drove men to dark places, and Giuseppe knew exactly where the fish would be plentiful: the waters around Poveglia. The other fishermen at the docks had fallen silent when he mentioned it yesterday. Old Tommaso had grabbed his arm with surprising strength, his milky eyes wide with fear. "That place is cursed, Giuseppe. The dead don't rest easy there. My own brother went near those waters in 78. Came back speaking in tongues for a week before he drowned himself in his own bathtub." But Giuseppe was a practical man. Curses didn't pay bills. As his boat cut through the fog, Venice faded behind him like a dream dissolving. The bell tower of Poveglia emerged from the mist first, a black finger pointing accusingly at the sky. Then came the island itself, a dark smudge against the gray dawn. Even from a distance, he could see the crumbling hospital buildings, their empty windows staring like the sockets of a skull. The water changed as he approached. The usual blue-green of the lagoon turned darker, almost black, and an oily sheen reflected the weak morning light. The temperature dropped 10 degrees, and his breath came out in small clouds. His engine coughed once, twice, then died. Silence, not the peaceful quiet of early morning, but something oppressive and waiting. No gulls cried. No waves lapped against his hull. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. Giuseppe tried the engine again. Nothing. He'd maintained this motor for 20 years. It had never failed him before. He reached for his oars, but his hands trembled. Something was wrong with the water. It was too thick, too dark, and it smelled wrong, not of salt and algae, but of something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a tomb. Then he saw them. Fish, hundreds of them, floating belly up around his boat, fresh dead by the look of them. Their eyes were gone, not eaten by scavengers, but burned out, leaving perfect black holes. As he watched, more rose from the depths, a silver carpet of death spreading across the water. A sound drifted across from the island. Bells. But Poveglia's bell tower had been silent for decades. The sound was wrong anyway, not the clear bronze tone of church bells, but something hollow and discordant, like someone striking human bones together. Giuseppe grabbed his oars and began rowing frantically away from the island. But the water had turned to molasses. Each stroke barely moved the boat, and the oily liquid clung to the oars like tar. The dead fish parted before him, creating a channel that led not toward home, but back toward Poveglia's rotting dock. The bells grew louder. windows of the abandoned hospital, he saw lights, not electric, but the wavering glow of candles. Shadows moved behind the broken glass. Too many shadows. The island had been abandoned since 1968, but something still lived there. Or perhaps lived was the wrong word. His boat bumped against the dock with a hollow thud. Giuseppe hadn't been rowing toward it. He was certain of that. But here he was. The rope from his boat wrapped itself around a rusted cleat, the knot tying itself with invisible hands. He tried to cut it, but his filleting knife passed through the rope as if it were made of smoke. The hospital loomed before him. OSPDALE PSICHIATRICO was still visible on the facade, the letters stained with what looked like dried blood. The main doors hung open, revealing a throat of darkness. From somewhere inside came a new sound screaming. Not one voice, but dozens. A chorus of agony that had been rehearsing for decades. Giuseppe's legs moved without his permission. One step onto the dock, then another. The wood groaned under his weight, soft with rot. Something crunched under his boot, a small skull, perhaps a cat or a rat. The island was littered with them, he noticed now. Thousands of small bones forming patterns in the dirt. The bells stopped, the screaming stopped. The silence was worse. At the hospital entrance, he tried to turn back, but his body wasn't his anymore. His legs carried him through the doors and into a lobby where the floor was carpeted with dead leaves and something that might have been hair. The walls were covered in scratch marks, some old, some fresh, some still bleeding. A figure stood at the far end of the corridor. It wore a doctor's coat, but the fabric was stained dark and hung in tatters. Its head was wrong tilted at an angle that suggested a broken neck. When it smiled, Giuseppe saw that its teeth had been filed to points. "Welcome," it said in a voice like grinding glass. "We've been expecting you. The fish always bring us new patients eventually." Giuseppe tried to scream, but only bubbles came out. His lungs were full of that oily water. Had been since he'd approached the island. He'd been drowning for the last 10 minutes and hadn't realized it. The doctor thing gestured to the rooms on either side of the corridor. Through the doorways, Giuseppe glimpsed horrors, operating tables where the operations never ended. Patients fused to their beds by decades of decay. Nurses with hollowed out faces still making their rounds, and in every room, the same black water seeping through the walls, rising from the floors. The plague victims came first, the doctor explained conversationally as it led him deeper into the hospital. Thousands of them burned in the fields out back. Their ash made the soil rich, but it made other things rich too, fed things that should have stayed hungry. Then came the mental patients. We helped them, you see. Helped them understand what the voices were really saying. They passed a room where a man in a straitjacket rocked back and forth, his mouth moving in silent prayer. He'd been dead for 50 years, but hadn't stopped praying yet. The isolation was perfect for our work, the doctor continued. No one to hear the screams, no one to question our methods. We discovered so much about the human mind, how much it could bend before breaking, how much it could break and still remain conscious, still remain aware. They climbed a staircase where each step was carved with names. Giuseppe recognized some of them, fishermen who'd gone missing over the years, men whose boats had been found drifting empty near Poveglia. The bell tower door stood open at the top of the stairs. Inside, the bells hung silent, but the ropes moved on their own, weaving patterns in the air. The doctor pointed to a window. Dr. Rossi threw himself from here in 1968, it said. He was the last living thing to leave the island. But he didn't really leave, of course. None of us do. The ash in the soil, the blood in the walls, the screams in the air, we're all part of Poveglia now. And soon you will be too. Giuseppe looked down at his hands. They were already changing, the skin becoming translucent, showing the black water flowing where blood should be. He could feel his memories dissolving, replaced by images of surgical instruments and ECT machines, of treatments that went on forever in rooms where time had stopped. Your boat will be found tomorrow, the doctor said kindly, empty like the others. Your wife will mourn. Life will go on. And the fish will keep swimming in our waters, fat on what seeps from our foundations, until another desperate soul comes looking for them. The transformation was almost complete now. Giuseppe felt the last of his human thoughts flickering out like candles in the wind, but with his final moment of clarity, he understood the truth. The doctor wasn't a ghost. Neither were the patients or nurses. They were something else, fragments of suffering so intense it had burned itself into reality. The island didn't just contain the dead. It was built from them. Layer upon layer of anguish crystallized into a place that existed outside normal space. And now he was part of it. In the fishing village, Maria woke to find her husband's side of the bed cold. By evening, the Coast Guard would find his boat drifting near Poveglia, nets full of fish with burned-out eyes. They'd tow it back, careful not to get too close to the island themselves. The fish would be destroyed. No one would eat anything from those waters. And the fishermen would continue to mark their charts with warnings, passing down the story of Giuseppe Morti, who learned too late that some abundances come with a price too terrible to pay. On Poveglia, a new figure joined the endless rounds of the hospital. It wore a fisherman's clothes and carried nets that would never dry. Sometimes, on foggy mornings, other desperate fishermen would see it standing at the end of the rotting dock, beckoning them closer, promising full nets and easy catches. The bells still ring on Poveglia, though no living hand pulls the ropes. They ring for plague victims burned centuries ago, for mental patients who found no peace in treatment or death, and for fishermen who sailed too close to cursed shores. But mostly, they ring as a warning that echoes across the dark waters of the lagoon. Some islands are abandoned for a reason, and some waters are empty of fish, because even they know better than to swim in the shadow of the dead.